all of the things that we are talking about on some level are about taking off the masks. So when we talk about the inclusion of women in medical studies, inclusion of people of color, about gays and lesbians, about any number of different issues, including the issues involving Trump and the nature of political conversation that we're about to be talking about. A part of what we're looking for are ways of taking off the masks and just being human to each other, just being real. And because of the fact that a part of the power of patriarchy consists in denying that, in withholding it, it's precisely the offering of it that I think is an important element in the conflict resolution process. And that's really where the trust begins to be built. I think this links a lot of the themes that we've been talking about together. I think, wanted to add that.
No, I think it's interesting. Let's pick up on the topic that is the other one billed for this morning, and also that which we discussed in Holyrood on Wednesday evening, and that is the idea of dialogue in politics. And I suppose the scene setting is that very often in politics, particularly in its public expression, we seem to be exposed, if that's the right word, to political leaders, politicians in general, who tend, in their language, to be accusatory, derogatory, to denounce their political opponents. In fact, not even their opponents, sometimes their political allies, apparently. And there is within politics, on its public face at least, what seems to be a considerable amount of discourtesy and lack of respect. There seems to be a polarization, personalization, and partisanship which infects and affects the discourse that we need. And of course, the result of that is the binary yes, no, right, wrong, in, out, leave, remain paradigm, which again has found its most recent expression in our country with the referendum on independence and the much more recent referendum on leaving the European Union. So all of that stuff is in mixed. And I think we had a fascinating conversation on Wednesday evening, and we had a number of members of the Scottish Parliament who expressed their discomfort with the way in which things are done, not least with the political party machine, which tends to, apparently to compel them to behave in certain ways, or so they felt. So maybe we could talk about that and talk about your experience of it. And by doing that, what I'd like to go back to is your earlier experiences, Ken, right back in the 60s and early 70s, because you were very much involved in the civil rights movement. You were involved in the anti-Vietnam movement as well. And you had some pretty interesting experiences at that time. So maybe you could take us into this field of political discourse by telling us a little bit by way of stories of your experience then, and then abstract maybe the learning from that and apply it to the present situation, and if you can, to our own situation here. I know you've had some discussions about this, the whole Brexit situation, and then the situation amongst the constituent parts of the United Kingdom and the friction and frisson which is resulting. So take us back to the 60s, first of all. Okay. You flower child,
back
you.
To the 60s.
Back to the 60s.
Well, let me, I think I'll just start personally by saying that I went to college at Berkeley. Need I say more? That will tell you a lot. And in the...
Do you know what, actually? For the younger members in the audience, it may not. For those of us a certain age, Berkeley has certain resonance. But right. I think you need to tell others who are younger why Berkeley has that particular cachet about it.
Well, that's actually a very good question. It's not an easy, I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but let me say it a little differently. the United States at the end of the 1950s and the beginning of the 1960s began to go through a complex set of transformations. The decline of a kind of, how should I say this? Well, first of all, of McCarthyism, which was an attack on the kind of, not just on the Communist Party, which was what the attack was focused on, but really an attack on political unorthodoxy. So I think that there are periods in time when things become very simple and there are times when they become complex. And one of the things that happened was that life became complex, meaning multifaceted, multiple options opening up in music, in art, in life. And those are always times in which the masks come off. Mm-hmm. And you get to take a little peek below the surface. So one of those issues that was what we went through a deep transition around was around the relationships between races in the United States, between African Americans and whites. And one of the things that Eleanor Roosevelt was also quite well known for was her opposition to lynching and to segregation. But Franklin, her husband, was deeply indebted to Southern white politicians and therefore didn't speak out in the way that she did, in a very dramatic and courageous way, in a time when it was not an easy thing to do. But the issue that was presented was, do we continue to treat people, other human beings, as less than equal, or do we, in fact, create a more human recognition that all of us belong in this society, all of us are a part of it, all of us get to participate in the decision-making process, all of us need to participate in the discourse and the problem solving. Well, of course, that was not possible in the South. I began becoming aware of this when I was in high school, and in college, became deeply aware of it and committed to doing something about it. So I began going on demonstrations, and you can think of this as sort of my life in conflict before I came into conflict resolution. I worked in the South in the Civil Rights Movement in Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, and in South Georgia. I worked in the North also. I was arrested, I was tear gassed, all of those things that took place during that period of time. And what came out of that...
Just stop for what was it about you that compelled you to get involved in that? As you said last night, was at risk to your life. You had to accept that this may cost you your life. What was it about the young Ken Cloke underneath that drove this?
Well, I think there's a fundamental realization, and I like, there's a nice little phrase from Henry David Thoreau where he said, "The price of anything is the amount of life you pay for it." And the realization that you are paying a part of your life for the conflicts that you are unable to overcome. Basically, it became clearer and clearer as a result of the changes that had taken place over a period of time, that unless this problem was solved, unless you, meaning me, unless I did something about this, I couldn't live with myself. I knew it was wrong. I knew that something needed to happen about it. I came to it from a place of a great deal of naivete about what the issues were, but I rapidly discovered particularly working in the South, what some of these deeper issues were. And I would say that from a conflict resolution point of view, what I discovered was that using power, the power of numbers, the power of demonstrations, the power of nonviolence, could achieve results. Martin Luther King Jr. said that there are two great powers in the world: the power to inflict suffering and the power to suffer. And it is the power to suffer openly, honestly, directly. It is the power of nonviolence, the willingness to accept that. So what I discovered was that it was important to use these methods in order to achieve certain kinds of results, but that deeper results required a different set of techniques. If you wanted to change people's hearts and minds, a demonstration wasn't going to do it. There had to be something else. And that something else, it seems to me, is dialogue.